The folder on Martin Calloway's desk held exactly 6 resumes, and he had already decided he didn't want to read any of them. It wasn't impatience, or not only that. It was the particular exhaustion of a man who had spent 23 years building something from nothing, who had interviewed hundreds of people for dozens of positions, and who had learned, slowly and at some cost, that a resume told you almost everything except what you actually needed to know. You couldn't read loyalty off a page. You couldn't see the moment a person decided to stay when leaving would have been easier. He pressed the intercom on his desk. "Catherine, send in the first one." Outside his office, in the wide corridor, with the tall windows that overlooked the St. Lawrence, 5 people sat in chairs, spaced at careful intervals, the way strangers always arranged themselves in waiting rooms, as though proximity might be contagious. 4 of them were adults, a man in his 50s in a gray blazer, a younger woman scrolling her phone, 2 others with the particular stillness of people rehearsing answers in their heads. The 5th was a child. She looked about 11, maybe 12. She wore a dark green jacket that was a size too big for her, the sleeves pushed up at the wrists, and she sat with a backpack on her lap and a single manila envelope held flat against it with both hands. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She was not scrolling anything. She was watching the door to Martin's office, the way you watch something you're trying not to be afraid of. Catherine, who had worked for Martin for 9 years and thought she had seen most things, paused at the doorway to the waiting area and said, carefully, "Mrs. Renner." The younger woman with the phone stood up. The child didn't move, but her grip on the envelope tightened just slightly. Martin's first 3 interviews took 40 minutes total. He was not a man who wasted time on pleasantries when his mind was already moving toward a conclusion. The 4th candidate, the man in the gray blazer, a Walter Drummond from Laval, who had 17 years in operations management, was more interesting, and they spoke for nearly half an hour. Martin didn't make any decisions out loud. He never did. But when Walter left, he sat for a moment with his pen still in his hand and thought, maybe. Then Catherine opened the door again and said nothing, and her expression was the specific one she used when she was leaving a thing entirely up to him. Behind her, in the doorway, was the child. She walked in the way children walk into rooms full of adult authority. Chin lifted slightly higher than felt natural, shoulders back in a way that looked practiced. She was carrying the manila envelope the way someone might carry a petition. She stopped in front of his desk, and she looked at him and she said, "My name is Lily. My mom was supposed to come today. She couldn't. She sent me instead." Martin set his pen down. "Your mom," he said. "Her name is Renee Ashford. She applied for the administrative coordinator position." Lily put the envelope on the edge of his desk, carefully, without dropping her eyes from his. "Her resume and her references are in there. She said you should read the cover letter first." Martin looked at the envelope. He looked at the girl. He had a particular stillness when he was thinking, a quality his employees sometimes mistook for anger, and his lawyer had once mistaken for boredom. It was neither. It was just the way his mind worked, gathering before it moved. "How old are you?" he said. 11, and your mother knows you're here." Something shifted in the girl's face. It was not a lie forming. It was something more complicated than that. "She knows I left the house," Lily said. "She doesn't know exactly where I went." "Why not?" "Because," Lily said, and paused and seemed to make a decision. "She's in the hospital. She's been there since Thursday. She couldn't call to cancel the interview because her phone died, and she really needs this job, sir." I looked up the address myself. I took the 105 and then the 24. Martin was quiet for a moment. Outside, the St. Lawrence was flat and gray under the November sky. "Sit down, Lily," he said. She sat. She kept the backpack on her lap. "Tell me about your mother," he said. "Not about the resume, not about the position, about her mother." He watched the girl process this, watched her decide whether it was a test, watched her decide it didn't matter. "She works really hard," Lily said. "She's worked at the same accounting office for 6 years, and before that she did bookkeeping for a restaurant in Verdun. She's good with numbers. She says numbers don't lie to you, they just wait for you to understand them." A pause. "She taught me that. What put her in the hospital? Her appendix. They thought it was something else at first. She kept working because she thought it would pass. She didn't go to the doctor until..." Lily stopped, started again. "She collapsed at the grocery store last Thursday. A lady called 911. Martin opened the envelope. He read the cover letter. It was typed, not printed from a template. You could tell by the small inconsistencies, the slightly uneven margins, the particular choices of phrasing that meant a person had sat with a blank page and actually thought. Renee Ashford had written, among other things, "I understand that reliability is the foundation of this role. I want you to know that in 6 years at my current position, I have missed 4 days of work. 3 of them were when my daughter was sick." He set the letter down. "She wrote that before she went to the hospital, I'm guessing," he said. "Sunday night," Lily said. "She printed it at the library Monday morning." Martin picked up his pen. He turned it over once, set it down again. "The job," he said. "Did she explain what it is?" "Coordinating communications for your regional offices. Scheduling, correspondence, some financial reporting." Lily recited this with the precision of someone who had read something several times. She said it was a step up from what she has now, but not so far that she couldn't do it. She said the salary would mean she could stop worrying about the heat bill. The last part came out more quietly than the rest. Lily looked at the window for a moment, just a moment, and then back at him. "I wasn't supposed to say that part," she said. "I know," Martin said. "I'm glad you did." He stood up. Lily watched him go to the window, which is what he did when he was thinking about something he hadn't expected to think about. Below, a delivery truck was pulling out of the laneway. A woman in a red coat was walking a dog the size of a footstool. "How long has it been?" he said. "Just the 2 of you?" "Since I was 4, Lily said. "My dad moved to Vancouver. He sends birthday cards sometimes." Martin turned around. There was something in his expression that Lily, at 11, couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, exactly, and it wasn't the professional sympathy she'd seen on the faces of teachers who'd read her file. It was something more personal than that, something that looked almost like recognition. "Wait here," he said. He went to Catherine's desk and spoke to her quietly for several minutes. Catherine typed something, made a phone call, wrote something on a notepad, made another call. Martin came back and sat in his chair. "Your mother is at the Montreal General," he said. "Yes. What floor?" 7, room 714. He wrote it down. "I'm going to call the hospital. Not to check on her condition, that's private. But I want to make sure she has what she needs in terms of the room, the care, that sort of thing." He said this plainly, not as an announcement, not asking for gratitude. "Is that all right with you?" Lily looked at him for a long moment. "Why would you do that?" "Because," Martin said, "your mother wrote a very good cover letter, and because you took 2 buses across the city in November to make sure someone read it." He paused. "That kind of effort doesn't happen in a vacuum. It means something about the household she's raising you in." Lily's jaw moved once, the way jaws do when a person is holding something in very deliberately. "She's going to be okay," Lily said. It sounded more like something she was telling herself than something she believed. "Yes," Martin said quietly. "She is." He went to the hospital that evening. He didn't tell anyone he was going. Not Catherine, not his brother Paul, who called at 6:30 to discuss Thanksgiving logistics, not his driver, who he sent home and replaced with his own car. He parked in the visitor structure and took the elevator to the 7th floor and found room 714 and knocked on the open door. The woman in the bed looked younger than he'd expected and more tired than anyone should have to look. She had Lily's coloring and Lily's particular quality of watchfulness, even lying down. When she saw a man she didn't recognize in the doorway, her expression moved through several stages quickly. Confusion, then a kind of professional alertness then, when she noticed what he was holding, a small paper bag from the cafe downstairs, confusion again. "Miss Ashford," he said, "my name is Martin Calloway. Your daughter came to see me today." The color left Renee's face so completely that Martin took a step toward the bed. "She's fine," he said immediately. "She's completely fine. She's at home. I had my assistant confirm it with her before I came." He pulled the chair closer and sat down so she didn't have to look up at him. "She's a remarkable kid, your daughter. I thought you should know that." Renee closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was something wet at the corner of one of them, which she ignored with the dignity of a person who has learned to manage emotion in front of strangers. "She went to the interview," Renee said. It wasn't a question. She did. "She took the 105 and the 24. She had your resume in an envelope. She told me to read the cover letter first." A sound came out of Renee that might have been a laugh if things had been slightly different. "I'm so sorry. I didn't tell her to do that. I would never. I know, Martin said. That's part of why I'm here. He told her then what he'd arranged, that the hospital administrator had upgraded her room to a private one at no additional charge to her, that her post-surgical care would be extended by 2 days to make sure she was stable before discharge, and that he had spoken to her current employer. Briefly, professionally, to explain there had been a medical emergency and she would need the week. Renee listened to all of this with the expression of someone hearing something in a language they're not sure they actually speak. Why? She said finally. Because your daughter asked me to read your cover letter, Martin said, and I did. And I think you're exactly what I've been trying to find for this position for 4 months. He said it simply, without ceremony, the way you say things when you mean them and don't need them to sound impressive. I'd like to offer you the job. Formally, with the proper paperwork, when you're back on your feet. But I wanted you to know now, so that's one less thing you're carrying. Renee looked at the ceiling for a moment. Her throat moved. I don't know how to respond to this, she said. You don't have to respond to it, Martin said. Just rest. He stood up to leave and she said, Mr. Calloway. He turned. How did she just walk in? Did someone let her in? She introduced herself to my receptionist, Martin said, and explained that she had an appointment. She was technically not wrong. Your name was on the schedule. The corner of his mouth moved. My receptionist let her sit down because she looked like she'd been very carefully not crying for a very long time, and Linda has a soft spot for that particular situation. Renee made the almost law sound again. That's very much Lily, she said softly. I know, Martin said. I could tell. What Martin Calloway had not said to Renee, and what he did not say to Catherine the next morning, or to his brother Paul at Thanksgiving, or to anyone for quite some time, was this, that when Lily had walked into his office with her backpack on her lap and her chin held carefully level, something had happened in his chest that he hadn't been prepared for. He was a practical man. He believed in systems and evidence and the measured application of effort. He did not believe in coincidences in the dramatic sense, the idea that the universe arranged things on your behalf, delivered what you needed wrapped in the shape of an 11-year-old girl on a Tuesday afternoon in November. He did not believe that, but he had grown up in Rouyn-Noranda, the son of a man who drove a truck and a woman who kept the books for 4 businesses out of the kitchen, and there had been a winter. He was 9. It was 1987, and the details were still precise in the way that childhood cold is always precise. When things had gotten bad enough that his mother had put on her good coat and taken 2 buses to the employment office and sat in a plastic chair for 4 hours with his older sister's school photo in her wallet like a talisman, like proof of something, like a reason. He had never told anyone that story. It wasn't a story he'd thought about in years. But Lily had sat down across from him with her backpack and her envelope and her carefully leveled chin, and without saying anything about it at all, she had handed it back to him. He didn't know yet what to do with that. Renee started work on the first Monday of December, 3 weeks after the interview that wasn't. She was quieter than he'd expected from someone Lily had described as really good with people, but he understood eventually that she was simply someone who listened before she spoke, a quality rarer than most people acknowledged. She was meticulous and unhurried, and she remembered everything. She made no noise about the job being a step up, no performance of gratitude that would have made everyone uncomfortable. She simply did the work, and the work was good, and after a month Catherine told Martin, without being asked, that she was the best hire they'd made in 2 years. In January, Lily came to the office once, a school holiday, some arrangement with a friend that had fallen through, and sat at the small table in the reception area doing homework while her mother worked. Martin happened to pass through in the afternoon. Lily looked up from her math worksheet and said, without preamble, "Did you know that the probability that any 2 people share a birthday is already over 50% once you have 23 people in a room?" "I did know that," Martin said. Lily looked mildly disappointed. "Most adults don't. I'm an unusual adult," Martin said. "My mom says that too," Lily said, and looked back down at her worksheet, and Martin stood there for a moment in the afternoon light with something uncomplicated in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time, something that didn't have a name but felt, if he were being honest, like forward motion. He walked back down the hall to his office. Through the glass partition he could see Renee at her desk, one hand on the phone, the other making a note, her face calm and focused and entirely at home. And in the reception area, her daughter was arguing quietly with a math problem, her pencil moving and stopping and moving again. He sat down. He opened the folder on his desk. He thought about the winter of 1987, his mother's good coat, the plastic chairs. He thought about how many things had been held together, over the years, by people who just kept showing up, who took 2 buses in November, who wrote their cover letters at the kitchen table on Sunday night, who sat in waiting rooms with photos in their wallets like proof of something. He thought, some things you don't fix. Some things you just try to be part of. He picked up his pen, and he got back to work.